Hey, what's up? DJ Sue here, and we're here talking about another quick tip on MPC 3.0. We're looking at submixes, and submixes has been in the MPC for a long time. It's been 2.0. It might have even been in the 1.0 software. That's before my time. I use them a lot. They're basically tracks or buses or subgroups or groups or whatever you want to call them. They're basically tracks that you can route multiple tracks into and then process them together. One example is, let's say you're using 3 different synths for your bass and you want to put sidechain on all 3 of those synths. Well, you could do it individually, or you could send all 3 bass synths into one submix and then sidechain that one submix, and you only have to use a single sidechain. You can process multiple sounds together, like let's say you have a bunch of pads, you can put compression on there, you can EQ them all at the same time. It's a nice little tool. It kind of adds like a little bit of a gel to your sounds if you can process multiple things together, especially multiple similar sounding things together. So another use for it is you can actually take a drum program and split your sounds into multiple subgroups. So like sometimes I'll have a subgroup for kick and snare, one for hi-hats, one for perks, and then you can process each of those sounds individually and then send them back to one of your main outs. So very useful. If you haven't used them before, check them out. It's actually quite nice for mixing. Now, one of the biggest complaints I had on subgroups on 2.0 is the lack of ability to solo your submixes. And that was something I was really hoping they would put in 3.0, but they didn't, which is kind of a pain in the ass. So the only way you can solo these submixes is, unfortunately, to mute all of the other. Now, that's not ideal, right? Because let's say I want to solo submix 5. Well, then I have to unmute everything, and then I have to mute, and leave 5 unmuted. So the one workaround was you could MIDI map MIDI controller, which allowed you to map multiple parameters to a single control. So if you had like this MIDI Fighter Twister, which has push button encoders, you could map all of those mutes to a single encoder and do that 8 times, which is, not great. And unfortunately, MPC MIDI mapping and MIDI learn I haven't tested it extensively on 3.0, but on 2.15, it had some weird bugs. And the more complicated your mappings were, the more likely you were to encounter those bugs. So after a while, I just kind of gave up on that. But in 3.0, even though they didn't add solos, which kind of pissed me off, at least they added macros. And I figured out a way to get this functionality by mapping macros to the Qlinks. So I'm going to reroute my mic out of the submix. If you go into Qlink, press and hold the Qlink button, and then you have to hit one of your projects, because those are the ones you can basically customize to anything you want. I've got it in project 2, and then we hit Qlink edit. I've already got 6 of them set up, and I'm just going to do the last one, or second to last one. But the thing with macros is it allows you to map multiple functions to a single knob. So we can now go through and map our submix mutes one by one to this one knob, and just leave the one we want to solo out of it. And in this case, it would be submix 7. So we're just going to go through there. So this isn't great because I literally have to do this 8 different times so I get solos for each of my submixes. Once you have it set up, you can save it as a template. You can, and then, you just have it from that point on. So the last one is going to be submix 8, and we're going to just leave submix 7 out of it. And if I turn the knob, awesome. And if we go back into the mix, if I turn this knob, everything is muted except for submix 7. Exactly how I want it. Now, there's one extra little feature in the Qlinks. I'm not sure if this was in 2.15 or not. And usually this tray is going to be closed. You open it up and you have a toggle feature. So what toggle does is allows you to just use the capacitive touch buttons, and all you have to do is tap it. So now I'm going to set all of these to toggle, and you can now turn them all on and off at the touch of a button. Now, the one thing about toggle is if you're messing around with the knob and you accidentally reversed one, let's say like this, if you switch it back to toggle, this one is going to be off, and you don't want that. It's very simple. You just highlight the one that's reversed, click it to off, touch it again so they're all in line, put it back to toggle, and you're good to go. I now still have to map that last one, but on my Qlinks, bank 1, A and B, I've got submix 1, submix 2, submix 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. Well, you have to make sure you turn it off too. Otherwise, you'll screw up your mappings or screw up the toggles. But yeah, it's right there. So now I basically have solos for my submixes, except for 8. I still have to set that up. So yeah, it's fantastic. I've been waiting for this for a long time. It's a huge pain in the ass to set up because you have to do that essentially 8 times. But once it's set up, save it as a template, and you can solo all your submixes. You can also do this for returns, and that's another thing that I've always wanted is, you just want to hear what, let's say you're sending a bunch of stuff to the reverb. You just kind of want to hear what it sounds like. So it's basically the same thing, but there is another step removed from it. So I've already done the first 2, so I'm going to do the third one. I'm going to add a button, go to return, and mixer, mute, return, mixer, mute. Now I want to solo 3, so we're just gonna skip 3 and go to 4, mute, done. And we'll do the toggles, 1, 2, 3. And if you look here on our returns, I've got, I have to set this to project. I haven't toggled those, but I have the third one. And the same with this. Now, the difference with this, unfortunately, is if you're sending something to a reverb, you can't just press a button and it solos because it's not going to mute anything else going on in the track. Let's say I have this drum track going. Right? Let me just program in a quick beat and go from there. All right, good enough. You can hear a bunch of reverb going in on the kick. That's because I think I've already set that up to have a bunch of reverb. Yeah, that's my reverb. So let's say I want to hear or I want to put some reverb on the snares as well. Now the problem with that is when I solo the reverb, like so, oops. I'm still hearing the actual drum track because everything else is playing. And if I had a bunch of instruments, you'd hear everything. So what you need to do is you'd kind of have to go into the track and do two things. You'd have to solo the sound you want to hear on the reverb, and then you'd have to send the sound to a completely unused output, or you could send it to a submix and mute it. Either way, it's multiple steps. But now I can only hear the kick, which has reverb on it. Right? And if I wanted to hear just the snare, I'd do the same thing. And if I wanted to hear them both, I'd make sure my solo was set to multi and make sure both are sending to audio tracks that aren't connected to anything. So that's a little bit less than ideal. Hopefully, Akai is going to finally give us some solos in returns and in submixes. It'll render all of this moot. But until that happens, submixes is going to be a lot more useful for me. I think the send returns is just going to be a kind of a pain in the butt. That's something I would probably want to set up externally anyways, but yeah. So there you have it, how to solo submixes in MPC 3.0 using Qlinks and Macros. All right.